Hello, and welcome to the Millennial Nutritionist Podcast. I'm Isla Garcia, master's degree of nutrition science and registered dietitian, and I'm going to make weight loss realistic, sustainable, and uncomplicated for your busy lifestyle. On this podcast, me and my team of registered dietitians will decipher the latest nutrition research, dissect fad diets, and discuss social media trends for you so you can feel confident knowing what to eat to achieve your health goals. Research suggests that most weight loss programs aren't successful, but my experience has taught me that this is not because the participants aren't committed. It's because those diets are designed by non-nutrition professionals and center around severe restrictions. We are here to provide the facts about the science of weight loss so you can have the success you want and continue living your best life. Welcome back to the Millennial Nutritionist Podcast. My name is Isla, your host and CEO of the Millennial Nutritionist, and I have a guest on with me today who's a unique guest because she was a past client, but I'm really trying to tap into more of her professional expertise. Because today we're going to talk more about psych and eating, and specifically with emotional eating, because I know this comes up all the time for my clients, and I'm sure people that aren't even clients but working on their own health journey that are listening. And it's really above my scope to talk about this. So I wanted to enlist the help of somebody who would know really well how to answer these questions. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, Chelsea.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So I always have the guests introduce their whole last name. So would you tell us a little bit about yourself? Go ahead and say your first and last name, kind of what you do. And I guess even back to where your education was and what led you to do what you do now.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Chelsea Darida. I am a therapist at the Renfrew Center. So I provide individual and group therapy to women with eating disorders. So anorexia, bulimia, ARFID, and we do binge eating disorder as well. And then in addition to the therapy, I also do some meal coaching with my patients. So I'll sit with them as they're eating meals and help them with any challenges that might come up as they're eating. So that's kind of the gist of my job. I went to UNC Charlotte for both my undergraduate and master's degree. So I have both of those in social work, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I've been providing therapy for about 3 years now. I worked in an outpatient setting before I started working at the Renfrew Center, and was just super interested in my patients that had either disordered eating or eating disorders. So when this job opened up, I knew it was something I wanted to go for. And I really love it. I've been there for about a year now, and it's just been really cool to see some of the transformations that happen for my patients. So that's kind of my background and how I ended up where I am.
Yeah, I think it was so cool because you actually got the job when we were working together. And it was really cool to be able to kind of hear what your training was like, and then how our kind of program was complementing what you were learning there, and how we kind of had to even structure around what you were doing and your goals based on what they were teaching there. So it was really cool to even for me to learn about that, because I don't think I've ever fully had a friend or knew anyone who was a counselor at an eating disorder clinic. Through school as a dietitian, we do learn about it some, but mostly they say that's a specialty that you'll learn later on, if you want to. It's nothing that we can really talk about now. So it was really cool to kind of hear your experience. What about you, as a person? So are really fit our ideal client, or our audience demographic, with being a millennial who's health focused. What do you do in your free time, and or what foods have you been loving to eat recently?
Yeah, so I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and there is a million things to do here. So I never really get bored. I really love going to concerts. So that's something that I try to do frequently. And then I do love a good hot girl walk. So I love to go to the greenways or any of the parks and go on walks. And then just trying out new restaurants or things that are always popping up. And then as far as foods I really love eating, that's a hard question because I love all foods, but I think sushi is consistently a big favorite for me. And there is a restaurant in Charlotte where it kind of comes around on a conveyor belt and you can pick it up. So that's been really fun. And then I also love to bake. So I've been exploring making bread recently. So that's another thing that I really enjoy as well.
Oh, cool. Do you make it in a bread maker, or you make it just in a pan in the oven? How do you do it?
In a pan in the oven. A bread maker is a dream. Maybe I'll get one down the road.
Yeah, we had one actually growing up. My mom found one at a yard sale. She's like, we have to have this. And I didn't understand for a while, like why she loved it so much. But now I do, like hearing about people who make it, because it did, like, it was still like trial and error. Like sometimes we'd make it and it would just like all the ingredients for some reason would just sit at the bottom and not do anything. But it's definitely like a science to making it, right? Like having to get all the ingredients just right and everything.
Yep, absolutely. So it's challenging but fun.
Yeah. All right. So kind of hopping into our questions. So first, can you broadly just tell us what your definition is, or what like a definition we can go off of for what is emotional eating?
Yeah, so the technical definition of emotional eating is eating in order to escape, numb, or change your feelings. So, breaking that down a little bit, essentially, emotional eating is just when you eat, not because you're hungry, but because you're bored or stressed or anxious or sad or any other emotion. I like to use the example of like a woman in a romantic comedy who just got broken up with, and she's like sitting in front of the TV, like eating a carton of ice cream or chocolate. It's kind of cheesy, but it's the perfect example of just what emotional eating is, which is really turning to food for comfort. And it's just eating driven by your emotions versus by your hunger.
I always like wonder this, even just like personally, like, is there any room for like emotional eating in life, or is it all need to be like worked through?
I definitely think there's room for it, and I think it's probably unrealistic to say we're never gonna eat, because of our emotions, so I think it's just being really mindful about when you are doing it and knowing when it's time to, like, switch it up and do something else to honor the emotion.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So how do you know then? Like, what does that look like? Or does it just mean like working with a therapist to figure that out?
I think working with a therapist, of course, but I think just really tapping into what your emotion's trying to tell you, which we'll hopefully get into a little bit more as we keep talking. But a lot of times, emotions are asking us to like honor it in one way or another. And a lot of times, that's probably not through eating. So just trying to identify like what is the real need here.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Why does emotional eating even like happen? Like why do we even do that, do you think?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different factors that kind of play into it. The first one that stands out to me is just stress and dealing with stressful situations. I think a good example of this is like COVID. We all just went through it together. We're stressed out, we're bored, we're isolated from each other. It's like the perfect storm for emotional eating. So when we're bored or we're feeling things are like kind of out of our control, eating can be something purposeful or something that like fills up time for us. And then another reason I wanted to hit on was just having a hard time knowing what to do when we're experiencing those difficult or uncomfortable emotions.
Mhm.
So we're taught from a really young age to avoid things that make us feel bad. So when we do feel bad, we try to distract ourselves, and a lot of times that's through eating. But unfortunately, we know that doesn't work in the long run. So while it's comforting in the moment to eat, when we're done, whatever we're trying to avoid feeling, it's most likely going to come back up and maybe be even stronger than it was before.
Yeah. I feel like I see this a lot, even with people that don't even know what they are doing. Cause I feel like it's just like so ingrained to, I don't know if it's like the world as a whole or our culture or our generation. I don't really know, but because a lot of times I'll get people who say like, I'm just still so hungry. Like I'm hungry after I eat, or I'm hungry at 3 o'clock. And, I don't want any clients to be hungry. So I really ask them like, are you actually hungry? Like, do you feel like your stomach's growling? Like, have you eaten recently? Or do you feel like it's like, you just want to eat food? And a lot of times they're like, oh, I didn't even realize that was a difference. And like working through what that even feels like. So like, how can somebody actually like identify if they are like emotionally eating versus hungry? Like, do you think?
That's a good question. I would say really tapping in again to what you're feeling right before you're reaching for the food. So, am I like really upset or anxious right now and want to just like have something to do? Or did I like feel my stomach growl? Or am I like having like some hunger pains and that's why I reached for the food? So, it really just comes down to like being mindful about what you're feeling before you reach for the food.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And that's something I feel like I talk about all the time with clients too, is like just being more aware of what you're eating and why you're eating it. Because we're just so far removed a lot of times from that. Do you feel like you're tired of trying every new diet out there whenever you're ready to lose weight, but you never really find long-term success because it's either too restrictive or just not conducive to your lifestyle? Well, then let me tell you about our 3-month lifestyle reset program. This is an individualized weight loss approach where you'll be going through our proven 6-step method and you'll be led by a registered dietitian. By becoming a client of the program, you'll be able to learn how to control your weight, increase your energy and confidence, and also improve your overall well-being. Not to be dramatic, but a lot of clients tell us that they actually change their lives by going through the program and finally find a sustainable weight loss solution when they actually haven't found that with any other program. If you are interested in becoming a client, sign up for a discovery call on our website, themillennialnutritionist.com, with me, Isla Garcia, and I'll help match you with one of our registered dietitian coaches based off of your challenges and their nutrition expertise. If you're ready to find a sustainable weight loss solution in a non-judgmental and encouraging environment, I hope you'll connect with us soon. How do you actually fix emotional eating, do you think?
That's a really good question, and kind of a tough one to answer. But I think, again, I might be a little repetitive during this, but it's directly connected to our emotions. So a good place to start is, again, identifying the emotion you're feeling right before you have the urge to eat. Something I teach my patients is that all emotions serve a purpose. So even emotions that feel really uncomfortable or emotions we do want to get rid of. So, for example, if you're experiencing sadness, you might have the urge to eat in order to feel better. But like I mentioned, that's really just a distraction and it's going to provide a little bit of immediate relief, but it's not going to help the emotion go away in the long run. So I think with that being said, my recommendation for how to fix it is to take your moment to sit in the emotion and then ask yourself what you need. So if you're feeling sad, maybe you want to have some connection. So you call a friend and talk it out. Or maybe you just need a change of environment. So you go outside and go for a walk. I think by honoring our needs of the emotion of sadness in a different way, we're less likely to turn to that emotional eating.
So I feel like I hear you saying that not to ignore the emotion, that's not bad to have those emotions and we don't need to be covering them up. Instead, figure out how to identify it and then just find a different, are you saying coping mechanism or a different way to heal that emotion? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly.
Okay. And then what about therapy? At what point do you feel like people need a therapist for something like this? Does everyone, does no one, how does that fit in?
Yeah, I mean, I, of course, would preach that everyone can benefit from therapy. I think if you're noticing you're either having a hard time identifying the emotion that's happening, or when you do have the emotion, you're not quite sure how to meet the need of it, that might be a good time to kind of look into therapy a little bit more. I think obviously meeting with a dietitian can go a really long way as well, and helping you realize maybe you are emotionally eating. Like you said, you ask your patients about if they were hungry before they reached for the food. So it might come up in those appointments, but then you can realize I maybe need to dig a little bit deeper and go to therapy for this.
Yeah. And so what can therapy really help with? I guess basically what can it look like if you are healing that emotional eating? What's the result going to be?
That looks different for everyone, of course, but again, I think learning new coping skills is the biggest thing that will be helpful in addressing the emotional eating, like learning what are some replacements, because obviously you're going to still have the craving to eat or the urge to eat. So, what do you do instead?
I recommend therapy to almost all my clients, but I see it a lot with clients who they just can't seem to get over it. When we are, there's only so much I can really do when I'm with clients since I'm not a therapist, but when I'm able to identify, I think this is really what's holding you back. I think it's your mindset. I think it's you are really stressed out with work, or whatever is going on. And we're already eating enough protein. We're already eating meals throughout the day. You're not skipping food. That's not what's causing you to overeat. And since we're out of, the basic nutrition recommendations, it's time to maybe look at enlisting the help of a different field is what I normally see with that as well. So I thought about some examples that I see a lot with clients, and I thought we could get really specific on what some solutions could be. So the first one is boredom eating. So I feel like I recently have been picking up on this with clients. I didn't realize it was one where I guess if you're like home alone, I see this with a client who would be like home alone and they maybe want to have like a really fun night, and their fun night might include like eating a whole pizza and a whole thing of ice cream. And they just think that's like the fun thing to do because they're bored. What would be like your solution to something like that for somebody who is like eating just out of like boredom?
Yeah, and I totally relate to that and do the same thing, but except it's Indian food for me.
Okay, okay.
I think the first step is like realizing that you are bored. So, what have you been doing all day? Maybe you've been like sitting and watching TV for too long. So, doing what you can to kind of switch it up, like let's go for a walk or call a friend or read a book or whatever it may be. And then once you've kind of switched it up, you're most likely going to realize that you weren't even hungry in the first place. So, you were just doing that to kind of fill the time.
Mhm.
And if you're wanting to like have a fun night, I think again it comes back to what behaviors you can replace the eating with. So what do I think is fun? Maybe I'll have a movie night with myself, or I'll go, I don't know, go to Trader Joe's and walk around the aisles, which I think is fun. But just like again, replacing the behavior. And then I think if you notice like you're still kind of hungry, that's fine too. But I think something you taught me is kind of portioning. So like I'm gonna grab a plate and put chips on it versus grabbing like the whole bag of chips. So you can still eat and then really pay attention to your fullness cues.
Okay, so I hear you saying like marrying like two different types of interventions coming from like the nutrition space, but also the psych space. So, like, first, like, still having those fun foods if you want it, but make sure you're not overdoing it, just like mindlessly eating. But then also, if it becomes like too hard to do that, or just like another strategy is maybe just finding a non food way of having fun in general. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
And then what about stress eating? So this is something I see big since I really help a lot of millennials. Like we're dealing with a lot more stress than we're used to when we were in college or when we were younger. And the stress is just going to keep coming as we have kids, as like those kids have stress, like tons of stuff like that. So what would be your solution to somebody who is finding that they're overeating because of a lot of stress?
This is essentially like the same formula as the when you're bored, but noticing the emotions. I'm feeling stressed. And then what do I want to do to try to relieve it? Some of us might have the urge to grab like ice cream, which I think can provide that short term relief. You might feel a little bit less stress in that moment, but then later the stress is most likely just going to come back up. So again, thinking through alternative behaviors. So what can I do rather than grabbing the ice cream? Maybe if I'm feeling really stressed, I want to do some self care. I want to take a bath, put a face mask on, call a friend, whatever that might look like for someone else. So again, like honoring the stress in a way that doesn't involve food.
Okay, again, so like not ignoring it, but asking yourself like how can you feel better but not like eat out your feelings. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then the next one I was thinking of is nostalgia. So I don't even know if you would consider this emotional eating. I feel like within your definition it might be. So I see this a lot like around the holidays, where it's like we come to, October. And it's like, oh, I have to have this like one Halloween thing they have at the store because they never have it again. And then come November, they're like, oh, well, I have to have this like, pumpkin spice latte every single day that's the large size because they only have it right now. And then we roll around into December and it's like, well, I have to have this like cookie that's at the store because they only have it now. And then we're in like 3 or 4 months of like eating over our calories every day because it's like this idea of you can only have it this season. What about like a situation like that? What would you say to somebody who struggles with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough because I feel like a huge part of just celebrating any holidays or birthdays or anything in this culture is like kind of surrounding food. So, I mean, it's pretty significant. I think about when I was growing up, me and my sisters and my mom, we'd always make like a bunch of cookies on Christmas Eve. And so I really associate like cookies with Christmas. And it's a really fun memory, but it's one that can maybe lead to that mindset of like, well, I have to eat this specific cookie now, or else I'm never going to have it. I don't think there's anything wrong with eating a couple of cookies on Christmas, but it's again going back to am I hungry right now or is this providing like a sense of comfort or like helping me remember what that was like before. So a lot of my patients do have a really hard time around the holidays because there is so much food involved. So I always recommend like maybe you can find a way to create some new memories with friends or family. Like you can watch a certain Christmas movie or go ice skating together. Um, I think there's a lot of ways to like honor and enjoy holidays that don't involve food.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget about it. Again, I don't know if it's probably just because media doesn't really talk about it. I mean, everybody wants to sell food, so they're going to talk more about food, and then we get in our head that we have to have these like hyped up items. But I had an interview, or we had a podcast with our other coach, Catherine, recently, who we talked about overeating, and she brought up kind of the same point that you're saying is like we can also have fun with the people that we're hanging out with, and we don't have to put all this emphasis on just the food, but making some memories in other ways. I think are great ways to think about that. What about like social anxiety? I see this a lot with people who, again, I guess like come holidays or if they're on a vacation or something around that with their, when they're around a lot of people, maybe it's like a work event or something like that. And they're nervous to maybe talk to people or they want to seem busy. And so they just keep eating or even like drinking alcohol just to like feel busy and consuming something to kind of relieve that anxiety.
Yeah, so this is another one that comes up a lot for my patients, whether they're like going out to eat with a friend at a restaurant or they are like going to a party and everyone's going to be eating there and they want to just like fit in.
Mhm.
Um, Again, I think at the end of the day, you have to rely on your hunger and fullness cues and like really knowing those, like knowing what's best for you and your body. A lot of times, my patients will look at the menu for the restaurant that they know they're going to like ahead of time, so they can kind of pre-plan what they're going to get. Not be quite as impacted by like the social anxiety of choosing what you're going to eat because that can be difficult. And then I think I've heard you talk about this before, and it's a really good tip. But if you're feeling really anxious, and you know you like struggle with being kind of pressured by others, you can always eat ahead of time. So you're able to focus more on like the company, maybe just like grab a snack while you're there. So I just really liked that idea of kind of doing what you can to practice self care or best plan and prepare for like the social anxiety that you know is likely going to come up.
Great. Okay. Yeah. I think those are great. Like kind of like separating the anxiety from the food. We do talk about sometimes like a lot of times just events always have food. And sometimes it's not, it doesn't need to be like a food event. Like if it's not like an actual meal, it's fine. I think to, yeah, eat before or make sure you have that lunch if you're going into it knowing that like it's going to be like a snacky event and there's probably not going to be enough protein. There's not going to be enough produce. Let's kind of like just take that away from it. So it sounds like we're both kind of agreeing on that as our own disciplines. And so finally, what about like social drinking? Unless you are think that like falls within the same thing. Because this is something I hear a lot with people who like maybe work in like a sales job or work in a job where they have to do a lot of dinners and they feel it. They always say they don't feel the pressure to drink, but there's some sort of internal pressure to like feel like they need to drink a lot to keep up with everyone. And then like psychologically, they just seem like they can't quite get over it. What would you recommend there?
Yeah, I think not only like the pressure to socially drink, but a lot of that can, I mean, honestly, it helps with like the social anxiety piece of it too, right? So there's a lot of reasons why you may just like keep grabbing drinks. I think that's a little bit more difficult because you don't have like the fullness cues there to kind of rely on. So again, I think just relying on your emotions. Why am I grabbing this drink? Is it because I'm feeling anxious or is it because other people are doing it or do I really want the drink? So again, just like identifying intention.
Okay, good. So just again, coming back down to like the emotion behind it. And it sounds so simple, but when I work with clients, it's really like groundbreaking for them to like go through that. So like anybody listening, I think it's good to just like stop and pause like before you eat. Yeah. And like just like Chelsea's saying to like ask yourself why you're actually doing it. Cause it seems like for some clients that I have, it's just like instant. Like once they realize there's an emotion, okay, I'm going to do something else about it. When you understand like why you're overeating like that or over drinking. What about for people who like don't even know if they have them, like the emotions or like identifying the emotions? What are some ways that you can like actually identify what the emotion is?
Right. I think it's hard and it takes a lot of work because I mean, as a society, we've been taught to just like ignore most of our emotions or try to push them away. So if you're having a hard time identifying them, it's nothing to like feel ashamed about because that's kind of the way we've been like taught to do it.
Mhm.
Emotions really drive everything we do in our life. including eating. So the goal is really to not let the emotion dictate your behavior. So, not letting sadness lead to overeating, just like we don't want sadness to lead to other negative behaviors, like maybe spending all day in bed or isolating ourselves. So, the more you just practice, the easier it gets, and the less likely you'll be to keep using those harmful behaviors. And I think if you have a hard time identifying the emotion you're feeling, that's kind of where therapy comes in and can be really helpful. And I think self compassion goes a really long way too. So for me, it's like, okay, it's all right that I'm feeling sad right now. I know it's eventually going to pass. So again, not falling into that trap of trying to avoid or push it away.
Good, good, good. Yeah. And I think it's like, even what you said in the beginning is helpful just to know that like, it's okay to feel it, but what do we need to do about it instead? Like that feeling is coming from somewhere that maybe needs to be fixed or resolved. I know like something I personally was going through. I don't know if everybody follows me on Instagram or like the Millennial Nutritionist account. I was like, every day, like 3 or 4 o'clock, I really wanted dessert. And I was like, I don't know why I really wanted it. And I realized around like 3 or 4 o'clock, I get super tired and I'm honestly just like done with work. I don't want to do it anymore. And I resort to like helping myself like get through those last couple of hours by just like eating a dessert or having like a really sugary coffee. But honestly, just like realizing that about myself helped me so much to just like stop doing it and maybe just like taking a 20-minute nap if I can, since I work for myself. I totally can. I don't need to put the pressure on myself to work through the whole entire day all the time, or trying to get more sleep the night before, making my job a little bit easier on myself. And so just a kind of a testament to what you're saying of just like identifying my emotion, probably of like stress or overwhelm or something, and solving it with like a better solution. What would you say to someone who is just like tired of it being like hard to deal with losing weight? Because sometimes it's like really hard to even like deal through these emotions. Like maybe you didn't even realize this was your issue and now you do, and it's like so hard to deal with it. Like how can you like psychologically get through that feeling, do you think?
Yeah, I think first just allowing yourself again that self-compassion, like it is really hard. Emotional eating is just like any other like negative addictive behavior. Like we want to try to change it, but it's not always easy. So I think first like admitting that it's hard is a really good step in the right direction. But just like anything else, if you really want to make the change and losing weight is a really big goal for you, just not giving up. So I think again, something awesome that you taught me when I was in the program was just like if you have one off day that doesn't throw off all of your progress, it's going to even out with another day where you do well. So I think the same goes for the emotional eating. If you have a day or you have a moment where you fall back into it, like that's okay. You can realize that that happened, learn from it, and then try again tomorrow.
Okay, so you're saying like from, because this isn't something I super talk about a lot in my program since I'm not a therapist, but you're saying like even along the lines of like again that like perfectionist like problem. If we've identified that you probably have some issue with emotional eating, maybe what's one that we listed that you didn't realize and you're having a hard time getting over it, it's still okay to like have those days where you're not perfect 100% of the time, like where you still are like, well, I thought I was doing so much better, but then I like had a stressful day and I ate like a bunch of ice cream. That doesn't mean that it's time to like throw in the towel, right? You're saying just like correct it the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I still have moments and times where I like a Reese's peanut butter cup, like honestly does make me feel better. And that's okay. But again, yeah, just trying again tomorrow and giving yourself some grace there.
Good, good. Okay. Yeah. Because like for example, I do like I've had some clients who like maybe they get through the first couple months with me and it's great, everything's super fun and exciting when they first start. And then when we get down to it, and the program isn't hard, but the hardest part really is like staying consistent with everything, right, for the long term. And maybe realizing that those comforts that you used to have can't comfort you anymore. So I'm kind of thinking about a client who, everything was great in the beginning. And then like, as we were going on, she was just kind of sick of not being able to use food as a comfort anymore. And was just like, how am I going to live the rest of my life? Never being able to eat these, cookies to like, like eating like, 10 cookies at one time. Like what kind of like quality of life is that? And so we should really struggle with this idea of like what her life was going to look like. And maybe like the idea of eating 10 cookies when she feels sad was better for her than weight loss, and kind of struggling with those ideas. What would you say would be a solution to somebody like that, unless it's just go to therapy?
I was going to say go to therapy.
Yeah.
'Cause I think there's a lot more to unpack there. Of course, we can do our best to honor our emotions, but a lot of times there's a lot going on behind the emotion. And I think that's a great example of kind of talking through that a little bit further. Like, why are these cookies providing me so much comfort? Maybe there's a connection there, something in your childhood that you need to talk through. So yeah, I think going to therapy or really just like digging a little bit deeper on your own would be helpful in that situation.
Okay, good. So again, like, yeah, enlisting the help of just a professional is what we're always talking about for everything. But again, like in the therapy world, it's also really important. What can someone's life or day look like when they're like no longer emotionally eating, or at least like have it more in like a healthy balance, do you think?
Yeah, I love that question. I actually recently asked a patient of mine, I told her, I want you to imagine what it would feel like to have like a healthy relationship with food, whatever that looks like for you. And she described it by saying she would feel free. And that's like really stuck with me. So I think when you're no longer emotionally eating or you feel like you have that healthy relationship that you're working towards and you can experience kind of that feeling of freedom, just really grabbing that food when you're hungry and doing the same and kind of honoring your emotions.
Yeah, I hear that a lot with clients who start, they're just like tired of thinking about food all the time, tired of thinking about the decision, is this the right decision or not, or like regretting that they overate. And I mean, we do a lot with just making sure, like from the nutritional aspect, like, are you actually eating enough protein so you're full, so you're not hungry? Are you eating consistently so you're not like overeating and have all these hunger hormones at the end of the day? Because that's definitely going to cause you to overeat. But I think there's always like a like psych component that I definitely can't address that also should be looked at, I think, when you're trying to lose weight. And I think they both should be married together, like you're saying, so that you can still have that freedom to not emotionally eat and live free like that. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
So we picked out an article. We're kind of starting this new segment where we are looking at some like just articles and kind of going through them from a professional standpoint, because I don't know about you, but I'm like always asked about like, oh, have you seen this article? What do you think about it? So I thought we'll just go ahead and attack this head on. I thought this was a cool article talking about, I mean, something that I guess is second nature to me, but we always need the research behind it, right, to prove that it's a good idea. And was talking about like improving self-control when you're trying to lose weight, I guess, instead of just ignoring it. What did you kind of think about that whole like idea of like this, I guess, new weight loss approach, or this new way of thinking for weight loss?
I really liked it. I was very intrigued and liked the kind of idea of it. It talked a lot about focusing more on your internal cues versus your external cues, which I really liked because internal cues equals emotions, which I love. So you're a lot less likely to emotionally eat when you're focusing on that, like what's going on internally versus maybe what's going on externally. They gave that example of like hearing an ice cream truck and wanting to get some because of the nostalgia. So I think here you can note like, oh, I'm feeling nostalgic. I miss my friends that I used to get ice cream with, and like call them up versus going to get the ice cream.
Oh, that's so cool. So yeah, like what would that look like in like a session when you're working through that? Like if somebody's like interested in this, like resonates with them, like, and they're too afraid of like, I don't know, going into therapy for it. Like what in those sessions do you work on with people?
We focus a lot on what is behind the emotional experience. So, talking through what's happened in your past, whether that was like an hour ago or that was like 10 years ago, that's maybe causing you to have such a strong response, that's causing you to feel this emotion so intensely. So, I think that's a perfect example again of the nostalgia. Like maybe this brings something up for you, whatever that feeling might be. It might be positive, it might be negative, but that is what's leading you to want to utilize the behavior of eating.
I don't really know why. And when for me, when I was kind of reading through this article, for me, I guess it was like a no-brainer, but I know I'm a dietitian. I know that like that's why a lot of people overeat, is because the emotional connection to food. Do you feel like maybe that's why a lot of other diets don't work for the long term? Because I don't feel like many other like fad diets really even address the psych part. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, I completely agree. I think a lot of other diets are only focused on that external piece.
Mhm.
Um, get better sleep or manage your time better or just like making better food choices, which of course is like important, but I don't think it's getting to the root of the problem.
Mhm.
Like we can focus on getting enough sleep all day, but if we don't know how to respond to those challenging emotions, it's not really going to help in the long run.
Yeah, because I know whenever I talk to clients and we really dig into like why past efforts didn't work, because I always want to make sure we are trying something different here and to make sure that they haven't failed on a program that's already like ours, because maybe they need to work on something else and I don't even want them to waste their money. A lot of times we go through all the other like fad diets that are super restrictive. And I won't name any names, but I'm sure everybody can think of what they are. It seems like the reason that they tell me that it didn't work is because they're like, well, I like changed jobs and like now I have a different schedule and I just get home and I overeat because I'm so stressed out, and that all the skills that I learned with just restricting didn't translate over, or that they had a kid and now they don't know how to like navigate like time management anymore, and every time their kid eats goldfish they end up eating a whole bunch of goldfish too. So it does seem like that psych component is never really addressed, and it seems awesome that like they're kind of moving this in this way. How do you feel like somebody can improve their self-control overall, or is it like everything you've already been saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and it kind of goes along with what you were just saying, but I think being really intentional about how you're fueling your body like throughout the day. If you're trying to stop emotionally eating, I think a big piece of this is making sure you're eating enough throughout the day, which is another thing that you taught me. If you're less likely to like eat breakfast, you're more likely to want to emotionally eat or overeat later on because you're so hungry. So I think that honestly goes a long way, not only with emotional eating, but it just gives your brain that nutrition it needs to kind of maybe improve or increase your self control. And then I think another great tip, and one I talk about with my patients a lot, is realizing that urges and emotions always pass. So I like to think about emotions as a wave. So it starts out really big and it feels really strong. But if you wait it out, you just give yourself 5 or 10 minutes to sit in that emotion or that urge, it's going to eventually get smaller. And I think that can be applied to self control. So when you're having certain urges, just wait it out and it will eventually pass.
Yeah, again, so like marrying the two, the nutrition world and the kind of psych world in one, and making sure you're fueling yourself so you actually aren't like hungry and then overeating, but also learning how to navigate those emotions a little bit better in case that is what's really going on. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really learned a lot, even from you, and I hope this was super helpful. I think this will be really helpful for everybody listening who's struggling with emotional eating. If somebody is trying to work with a therapist, like what is a way they can go about it? Because that's honestly a question that I get all the time from clients.
Yeah. So a good first place to start, and something I always recommend, is just doing a search specifically online for what you're looking for. So if you use certain websites like Psychology Today, for example, you can really filter by like, this is my insurance. This is where I live. This is like the expertise that I want. So you can even put like emotional eating and see who might come up as something that like that's something they specialize in. So always starting online. And I think there's so many therapists out there and it can feel really overwhelming, but just knowing that you can get really specific with what you're looking for.
Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I hope to talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Millennial Nutritionist Podcast. For daily weight loss tips and nutrition information, you can find us on Instagram at the.millennial.nutritionist and on TikTok at millennial.nutritionist. If you find this information helpful, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend who needs encouragement on their health journey. See you in the next episode.